Welcome to another episode of Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a very accomplished professional, an author, and someone who is doing a lot of work in the area of uh, history about our country from New Delhi, India, Dr. Rajneesh Karki. Rajneesh, welcome to the show.
My pleasure, Ashutosh. Thank you.
Dr. Karki is a scholar, a management advisor, and an author. He's the Chief Executive Officer of Karki Associates, which is the strategy boutique, and he's an author of a book titled Timeline India, Rediscovery of the Chronology of 10 Millennia Civilization. So, Rajneesh, before we talk about your book, which is going to be the primary focus of our conversation,
Sure.
a few questions about your own journey. What inspired you to embark on the journey of reassessing India's historical timeline, and how did your background influence this decision?
So broad and specific. At the core level, I'm a researcher, and I'm excited by research questions. And research questions, let me explore new areas or also the anomalies, and which has taken me from one discipline to another, whether in strategy and management to policy to this. And the specific reason here was that I wrote a book, which is about the first book on strategy or the corporate strategy, which came out in 2008 by Penguin. Then they took it global in 2009. And another major event happened was I shifted my base from Bombay to Delhi in 2009.
Right.
And I had a continuing public policy work happening before with the state as well as the center level.
Yeah.
So then I said, let me explore an interesting area called strategy of a state. So a state also has a strategy. Let's say India has a state today, you have Pakistan, you have Bangladesh, you have US, Trump coming in, changing things over there. So there is a strategy. What country is trying to, what a nation is trying, a state is trying to do and achieve, long run, short run, and the way it is going about. That is the strategy.
Right.
And the strategy is based on certain variables, what it sees.
Okay.
And that strategy in case of state, plays out over decades and centuries, before and after, the variables and all this.
Right.
So I started working on strategy of the state as a topic.
Oh, wow.
And then I said, let me look at two great works of statecraft. One is Chanakya's Arthashastra, which defined that what state should do and manage kind of it. And another work is equally important, is Machiavelli's Prince, which came around 1450s by 1500, around the time the Renaissance was happening, and defined the whole idea of a nation state. So when I started doing this, I found that Chanakya's date is not matching. And in fact, if you read the Arthashastra, now we have got very good translations available. There's absolutely no mention of a foreign or a Greek invasion and Chanakya building up Chandragupta Maurya who was a legitimate king of the Mahapadmananda, and into emperor, take over the reins of the empire and driving the Yavanas or the Greeks out. There's absolutely no mention of any foreign attack. So if it is not even a variable, then there's some major anomaly out there. And that set me into an inquiry. And this, as you said, it was in 2009-10. And so it has gone on for the last 15 years. While I've continued my major work of strategy in the corporate and political economic domains, and also research. In fact, the second edition of my strategy book came out from Penguin Random House last year. And that was parallel. But this continued all along. And then in 2022, I wrote an article that we need to rediscover our chronology, rediscovering Indian chronology, and which was widely circulated. And that's how the thing started. Then I started talking to the publishers. There was major interest. So from 3-4 leading publishers, and then finally Rupa signed me up with a very good commission.
No, Rupa is a fantastic organization.
So that's how I came into it.
Yeah. I've published 5 books with Rupa.
I must add a couple of quick points here. See, let's say in my doctoral work, I got a training as a historian. because of the business and economic history. So
Mm.
business economic history is a stream of history, which is a very important part of history. And in that also, there was a school of strategy evolved, and also the discipline was by Chandler in Harvard Business School and Dwijen Tripathi at IIM Ahmedabad in the 60s. And I was his only student. So I gave some 60 seminars, and those that actually
Rajneesh, I'd like to
grounded.
move to your book now
Okay,
because we have limited time.
sure.
You've written this book, Timeline India, Rediscovery of the Chronology of a 10 Millennia Civilization. You just told me that when you were reading Arthashastra, and I've read it as well, and you're absolutely right, there's no mention of any invasion of Alexander or anything else. And therefore, my question is, what prompted you to question the reliance on Alexander's invasion in 325 BCE as a chronological anchor for Indian history?
Absolutely. I think, see, anchor. Let me make a few statements. See, chronology is the backbone of history. And
Correct.
chronology essentially is placing the major events that have happened in the right time and space, particularly later time, the chrono. It's a continuum.
Mhm.
So it is the backbone around which any historical narrative or understanding is based.
Hmm.
Okay? And here, of course, we are mentioning actually more of prehistory. See, one may call the historian, the domain of a historian comes in when the written records are start available.
Hmm.
Okay, so in our case, written records are available much later. So it's prehistory, but we do need to understand that chronology is the backbone. And any chronology,
Yeah.
whenever we take it, it is based around one anchor, maybe 2-3 anchors.
Hmm.
Okay. And that anchor has to be I would call it by definition, among the most pivotal or the central event of a period or the entire chronology.
Hmm.
And what I found here was that, in fact, it's now very well documented. Alexander's invasion has absolutely no mention in the Indian text whatsoever. That time, earlier, obviously not, and later on. No mention. In fact, Romila and Romila Thapar and Upinder Singh say it very clearly. It was a peripheral and a non-event. So to make that into an anchor is conceptually limiting, if not wrong.
Correct.
Okay? That is one part.
Correct.
And second is, but I do use it as a marker, as Alexander attack. But also, another conceptual problem we have, or a methodological problem we have, is that there is, of course, no Indian records on mention. So it was a non-event. And also the Greek records are very sparse. So in fact, the biggest work they call it is the Indica by Megasthenes. But that itself is lost. Only some fragments are available. So whatever we are piecing together is from those fragments. And related to that, I call it, which is quite, I found it that in case of the prehistory or the pre-period, the amount of documents that are available in India is far more than all other civilizations put together. See, we have the Vedas, the Smriti text, the Shruti text, the Smriti text, the other texts, then the Vedantas, plus also the architecture and other professional texts and all those are available. So, which are authentic. We need to develop our chronology on the basis of that. So, choosing the right anchor, or at least the right markers, is very important to understand a phenomenon correctly.
Absolutely right. You're so right. I was arguing one day with somebody, and I said, if Arthashastra could have been written in the 320 BCE, with that amount of detail, can you imagine the kind of knowledge that must have existed?
Yeah.
To have such an advanced text at that time.
And also this 325 BCE, we should put it with a question mark. It's a part of the exploration. When exactly it came in.
Correct.
So, and that was just, see, this kind of, as Ashutosh you mentioned, it describes a very, very advanced political economy and also a state. So I call it a civilization. There's a technology, the kind of materials it's talking about, the economy, the trade, the currencies they're talking about, the socio-political economy it is talking about. So it's a very advanced society at that point of time. And that could not happen in maybe even in centuries or even a millennia. It has to be much longer.
Absolutely. So my next question for you, Rajneesh, is that, you talk about the 4 periods. So can you explain the significance of the 4 periods construct you use to map Indian civilization from 9000 BCE to 1192 CE?
But it's a long answer, but
Yeah, please.
feel free to interrupt.
No, please
anytime.
give me the answer.
Okay, so in a way, see, the Holocene, the last ice ages ended around 9000 BC. And in my book, I go deeper into Homo sapiens and all those that how came over.
Yeah.
But after 9000 BC, the settling people, the hunter-gatherers, which used to roam around in bands or some places, they'll tell them moving. They needed an opportunity that they can settle at one place. And once you settle at one place, lived around the year, keep moving, that's the settling starts. And that was possible post Holocene. And here, one interesting archaeological or other record geological is this the concept of lucky latitudes. See, this is a 20 degree centigrade, 20 degree to 40 degree north and southern hemisphere. Had the most hospitable conditions.
Correct.
For hunter-gatherers to settle down, find seeds, then they plant it. And if you plant a seed intentionally, it's a small step, but a huge step in the evolution of civilization, because that's how the agriculture starts. And then animal domestication. So the bulk of the area, nearly 80% of 20 to 40 degrees centigrade latitude is in the northern hemisphere. And within the northern hemisphere, the largest continuous landmass was in India.
Correct. So
this was the most likely place for civilization to take root. And this is parallel to the hilly flanks in the Syria, Jordan Valley and the northwest of Tigris Euphrates. Okay, so that's where the settling would have taken place. And then you build upon it. And in India's case, another significant point. In fact, I call it, it's one of the most wonderful. The book is full of serendipitous surprises. See, because India is only a place where 80% or even 90% of rainfall happens during those 4 months.
Correct.
And rest is all dry. So for anybody to plant tree, do planting of crops or anything, you need to predict the monsoon.
Absolutely.
Get this 4 months right. Otherwise, your survival is at stake. And if the survival is at stake, no civilization can take place. And that's how you predict monsoon on the basis of movement of the sun and moon. And their and that's how the calendars.
Absolutely.
So civilization couldn't have moved forward without predicting some kind of monsoons. And that's why our year used to start with Varshafal, with June 21. And then they will go further into into year and then further on. And that required some kind of mathematics.
Correct.
Okay, that's the origin of this effect. And that's where then you combine around 7500 BC. Now we have the 3 nodal archaeological sites in Bhirana, Lahur Deva in UP, in west north of Lucknow, and Balochistan. See, when I say India in this conversation, it means the Indian subcontinent or South Asia. And then you have Mehergarh in Balochistan.
Correct.
So in all these places, we have found rice, we have found jowar, we have found wheat, and some animal domestication, animal bones, and all. So some kind of settling had started taking place around that time. So that is one marker. So around 9000 BC, so coming from 7500 BC. Then the second marker is for this 4 period contrast is that see, we have now calendars available. In fact, these calendars are not new. In 1860, Alexander Cunningham wrote a book with James Prinsep, who deciphered Brahmi script. They deciphered together. Prinsep started and Cunningham put it all together. And he was also the founder of Archaeological Survey of India. So he said there's a book called 27 Validated Indian Eras. And the earliest era is starting from 6777 BC, 3rd December. Now calibrated date is that. So you get one period. And another is we have the other era, which he validated, and even later on Mabel Duff and all those other writers in the 1860s, 80s also. They accept is the midnight of 17-18 February 3102 BCE, the start of Kali era. And in fact, inscriptions, about 800 inscriptions were found, and many of them have been archived, including in Vijayanagara Empire. The dating used to be in Kali era. These many years passed since Kali era. So we have that another calendar. And 325 BC is another marker.
Correct.
And the fourth marker is 1192, was when Muhammad Ghori and Prithviraj battle happened, and he won. And with that, actually, with this 1192, our calendars, the Indian calendars, got calibrated with the Hijri calendar, which is a lunar calendar. And Hijri was anyway calibrated with the European calendar of solar calendar.
Right.
And ours is a lunisolar calendar.
Yeah.
So with these four markers, 1000 CC to 6777 BC, so one period very clearly, then 6777 to 3102, another period, then 3102 to 325, another period, and 325 to 1190.
Oh, amazing.
Reasonably well spaced out.
Oh,
and that is one. And
Oh.
the last bit I'll add in that. And what I find is that, see, you have to, for understanding, see, any research, what you do, it needs to be communicated and understood clearly. So what you do is we look for pivotal event around those. So you name it. And the biggest event in the pre-67 was settling, civilization form. Second event was the two greatest events of the Indian history, which is alive today. Every hour, every Indian worldwide is Ramayana and Mahabharata.
Correct.
Okay. And the third event is actually the impact of Mahabharata war was so much into political economy, the states and all those, and even out migrations and everything. So you call it the third period of post-Mahabharata. And the fourth period, the fourth period, 325 to 1192, is then the Gupta dynasty comes in. Your Rajput will become the major. So you name it. So that gives you the four period.
Amazing.
Is, it's cohesive, it's also exclusive, and it's discriminatory, like any other classification. A good classification.
What a great response. And thank you for educating me and all my listeners. And, I wish I had the luxury of a lot of time, but I will call you again to go into much more detail about some of these. I'd like to move on. And my next question is that what are some of the most compelling archaeological findings that support your claim of a 10 millennia old Indian civilization?
Sure. See, this book actually, and particularly a chronology book, the primary emphasis is chronology. We require hard evidence, hard material evidence, which is coming from archaeology. But to get the datings right, we have to have the precise evidence. Okay, I'm answering your question in two parts. And this precise evidence is actually coming from three sources. One is those calendars, 27 calendars, and also we have refined up to the Vikrama calendar. Like say the Vikrama calendar is followed mostly north and west even till today. And the Saka, the Salivana calendar, which is south and east. Okay, and so the calendars. Second, it's coming from astronomy and astrophysics. Astronomy, astrophysics is you have the precession equinox. So Earth moves in a semi-elliptical orbit. So because of that, for 23,000 years is the same, then it repeats after. So that gives you a marker to go deep into history. Okay. Then you have the polar star and other, because the polar star changes. So then it gives you certain markers and the basics in place, and the astrophysics comes into play. And the third is equally important is the texts from which we have the Yuga concept. How that Yuga concept evolved from, as I said, our calendar is lunisolar calendar. So we said year is 360 years, 360 days, and 12 months or 30 days each, so 360 days. So but the Earth actually takes 365.2525 and goes around the sun. So every 5 years you have to correct and add one more month. So Adhika Masa. And around that, the Yuga concept, and when we shifted to the Jupiter-based calendar, the Jubier calendar, 12,000 years, 12 years, then now we have the 1200 to 360 years Kali era. So the Yuga thing is, so the Yuga chronology is now we have been able to track it and explain it, that how the 27th Chatur Yuga, the Treta and Dwapar starts, which coherents with the Ramayana and Mahabharata. And in those Mahabharata, going back a little, in the astronomy part, one major breakthrough that has happened in the last 20 years is that we have now software available. We can predict up to 20,000 years, 3,000 years ago, not only the year, date, hour, but also the eclipses. Whether the eclipse is available from Jan or from Benares or somewhere. Right. So that kind of accuracy, that tool is available now. Right. Okay? And then you have the texts. So you have the yugas where you have the genealogies. Genealogies are, let's say Ram was the 64th king of the Ikshvaku dynasty. Then you have the Kuru dynasty list. Then you have the Magadha list. So our genealogies are going all the way to 6,900 BC. Wow. And in fact, when Alexander came, he was given a list of 154 kings who had ruled India. So if you do 30 years into 150, 4,500, so 5,000 years genealogy approximately is there. So this is, so they all come together. Now you need to repeat your question specifically. No. It's basically the chronology is based on the hard evidence from archaeology and precise evidence from these three. The calendars, astronomy, astrophysics, and the genealogies, yugas, and the texts. They come together. And archaeology, I say archaeology also is evolving in the sense, see, one of the flaws I found, I must point out, see, this chronology which we have even prevailing till today. In fact, Romila Thapar's book, Romila Thapar is a great scholar. Yeah. I'm also a scholar. So we are all part of science and scholarship. Okay. So the chronology which came out in her book in 2021 is almost exactly the same as it was propounded in 1910, 1920 by Vincent Smith in two books. One was the Oxford History of India, then Oxford School Books History. Okay, and he said that beyond 600 BC, things are pretty uncertain. So let's not teach vague things to our students. So we'll start our history from 600 BC. So this chronology, which was around 1915-20, where 10 and 20 was developed, 1950 was Oxford School Book came out. That became the standard history of India and chronology, which was taught worldwide. And that has not been updated for the last 100 years. Oh, amazing. Whereas Harappan sites were discovered in 1920s. Harappa was 1923, Mohenjo-daro in 28. Then we suddenly found there is material evidence of 3,000 years. One. And then as we started going deeper by 1950s or so, you had Bhirana, Mehergarh getting established, found out, going to 7,500 BC. Then you are having evidence of 5,000 BC. We started having trade, including long distance trade, including Mesopotamia and all these areas. Yeah. And so that progresses. By 3000 BC, we found sites like Lakhigarhi, which are factories, and Mohenjo-daro, which have large public establishments and towns, water planning at Dholpira, at the ports. So by 3000 BC, we have a very, very advanced techno-economically and socio-culturally civilization. So archaeology is advancing. So we have gone all the way through 7,500 BC.
Fascinating, fascinating. And my next question is, how does your reassessment of Chandragupta Maurya's reign differ from the traditional historical accounts? Because you said you kept 325 BCE as one of the four masters. How have you interpreted this differently?
See, the small history here. Around 1780s, William Jones, he was one of the first to plow into the Indian texts and all those. And he said in one place, oh, there was a mention of Chandrakotas. So he put it as Chandragupta Maurya. And since then it has been fixed. Okay. However, it was just a flamboyant conjecture. So that became the path. But it turns out we have more evidence. Is that Chandragupta was okay. But that was not Chandragupta Maurya, but it was a Gupta Chandragupta, which came in 650 years later. And also in these fragments of Megasthenes Indica, which is done by the other Plato and other Plenus and other people, like Aren and all those guys, there is also mention that Sandrakotas was son of Xandrams, and his son was Sandocryptus. Okay, so if you do, even in phonetics wise, phonetics is a very big base for any kind of chronology and history. Phonetics and philology and all this is a very big base. At the most, it can be corrected. But it is wrong. It's because Chandragupta Maurya's father was Dhanananda,
Hmm.
and his son was Bindusara, which has no linkage. But here, before Chandragupta of Gupta dynasty, the previous king was Chandrashri, which has better resonance with Jandrans. And his son was Samudragupta, which has a better resonance with Sandocryptus.
Right.
So this 3 and that 3, this is phonetically invalid. So it was a wrong turn.
Sure.
And we just went in that for 100 years and all those, more than 200 years. And then of course, there is a lot of other things that happened together. And along that, Mr. Max Muller, great scholar, he came with that Aryan thing, also. That I think is the biggest mistakes, these two. These two are the big blunders, I would call it, which needs to be corrected. Should have been corrected long back. So once you correct that, the whole chronology falls into place. And in fact, it becomes so good, so nice, so pleasant that many of the kings which were turned, because they could not be fitted into, because see, if your marker is 325, then you have to squeeze everything. So some of the great kings like Vikramaditya, on whom the Vikrama calendar is based, and which is the largest calendar even till today for all our Kumbh Melas and everything. He had to be made a mythical king. And he had such a great reputation as a king, emperor. Then also that the Kalidas, Dhanvantri, and Baramira, where is the 9 Ratnas? And we recognize Kalidas, but Vikramaditya we don't. So all those basic flaws, these are very basic flaws that needs to be corrected, which gets corrected.
Very interesting. So I have time for 2 more questions.
Sure.
You spoke a few minutes back about studying the eclipse from Varanasi and from one other place.
Ujjain. Ujjain is important because our GMT used to be Ujjain.
Correct. My question to you is what role do astronomical observations play in validating your proposed chronology?
I would call it, astronomy yields, along with calendars, available calendars, precise evidence. So that is one. And also many data points. Okay. So your analysis, or in a way conclusion, in fact, when in research, we call it the most basic is triangulation. So if there are 3 data points which fall into a pattern or a line, that means you have a triangle. Okay. With astronomy and all, we have about at least 20 to 30 or 40 data points, which makes it absolutely rock solid, any conclusion. And secondly, we can go as there is, so the validation is clear and perfect, and also it's precise. Let's say, for example, Mahabharata war had during those 18 days, there were 2 lunar eclipses.
Correct.
This is a very rare phenomenon. And then Mahabharata war, let's say I must tell you, you must put a caution here, about Mahabharata date. We are science can never be 100% perfect.
Sure.
Okay. About Mahabharata war dating, we are 99.999% correct with 3138 BCE, because 36 years, it was 36 years before, 1718, 3102 BCE, Grand Conjunction, on which all our calendars are made, in the start of calendar.
Yeah.
About Ramayana date, and I'm a researcher, I'm a skeptic also. As a research is skepticism. Okay? And in spite of our 20-point data validity, and also the data validity, actually, we go through at least 4 levels in multidisciplinary research. One, validity within a work, let's say Valmiki Ramayana or Ved Vyasa's Mahabharata, okay, within a work. Then we say validity within a discipline, that other similar works of Indian or something, that is internal validity. Then it is validated external validity, that any data which is conclusion before it is being made, it has to be validated by archaeology, disciplines outside. Then we validate the construct to reach this multidisciplinary conclusion. So the astronomy played a major role, but it is one of the data points. And I would call it, no conclusion has been made simply on the basis of one work or one discipline. It is multiple disciplines. And that's where the strength is, because we are talking of prehistory, where there is no documentation available. So we have to use multiple disciplines to reach at it. And I think you have, I saw some of the question, see, that is my, I would call it unique expertise.
Correct.
Because I come from strategy discipline, which by definition is multidisciplinary. And we integrate, findings from economics and psychology.
Correct.
To reach a conclusion, and also operations methods. So I was uniquely placed. I'm just fortunate there.
Amazing.
On that count.
Amazing. And my last question for you, Rajneesh.
Sure.
Given the amount of work research that you have already done, I'd love to get your perspective on how does your book or your work reposition India's cultural and civilizational continuity in the global historical narrative?
I would think this is a fantastic question to end this conversation in the sense that puts sum it all together. See, there are couple of few points here. One, that currently it is understood that the civilization started around 3500 BCE from Mesopotamia. Okay. Here the conclusion is that we are taking it to 7500 BCE.
Right.
That is 4000 years behind, further down, back, and also the location. So time and space. So 4000-year correction from 3500 BCE to 7500 BCE. It's a huge leap in time. And space, it is India. Okay. Second, smaller point here. What we have found, the evidence, after 1192, everything is clear. Like, no, there's not much doubt actually in chronology. So historical narratives, one can change here and there, but broadly. So here, there is a continuity of civilization. There's virtually no break even of 10 years throughout the Indian landmass. Some places we have evidence, some places we don't have evidence. But that's what a good research points out. Like, no, it opens new avenues of research. So, and here in the book, I continue pointing out that the Gangetic Valley plains, we have a lack of data. One of the reasons, actually, most of our construction here was wooden. So that has dissipated. So we have left in the Harappan site area because the stone was used. And but there are lots. In fact, I would call it like somebody, Yasan Sinde, who has, I had a dialogue with him, who did the Rakhigari site excavation and all. He said, even in Rakhigari, they have excavated only 1%.
Yeah.
So when you can imagine that, I think as far as India is hugely under-researched in archaeology. Yeah. And I think we have not, if Rakhigari is 1%, if the whole of India, it could be like 1/1,000,000th of a percent. That is. So it changes so more data needs to come. And one of the unfortunate thing was the wrong turns, which I talked about, William Jones and Maxwell made, and the chronology. So that constricted the research. Now it opens up the research. So this is enabling this. Okay. And so once the first point, if the time and space of the location of the start of civilization shifts from 3500 Mesopotamia to 7500 India with a continuity of 10 millennia, then we need to rediscover and ask questions related. How the ideas, the people flowed over the periods in the evolution of civilization. What are the linkages between civilization? Because we know there were tremendous linkages between the Mesopotamian and even Egyptian civilization with the Indian. And later on, all along, the Greeks and all, there was so much interaction. But we need to understand the flows correctly. And all related to technologies and also economy, currencies, social part, the culture, and more so the state. So let's say one good example is I am dating Ikshvaku dynasty starting from 6850 BCE. And Manu's son was Ikshvaku. And Manu gave the Manusmriti, which current things apart, but it was a constitution.
Correct.
And a king, and the idea of a king. Correct. And also division of labor of the society and the economy. Otherwise, how the economy will function, how the society will function. Yeah. So in a way, this was a fundamental construct of a civilization, which is available. And Manusmriti came not out of the wind, out of the air. That there is a huge precedence to that. The Vedas and all the Manu sites. So around 7000 BC, all that had happened. So we can't say Mesopotamia started it or Greek started it. Greek is a very late thing. Greek is 800 BC. Yeah. So, but the rise of Greece from 800 to 325 BC with Alexander attacking an old civilization is itself is a great phenomenon, but we need to see that in the right light.
Oh,
So in
amazing.
some ways, the whole civilization history of the
Mm.
world
Mm.
need to be recalibrated. In fact, there's one guy called John Kie, one of the great authors, acclaimed authors who wrote India history, China history. He wrote to me. He said, yeah, I'm 87 now. I cannot redo my book of 1960s, but I will do whatever I can. But you should respect. And I said, of course I respect all contribution, including Vincent Smith's, William Jones. My work rides on them, Romila's work, Upinder's work rides on them. And we reach it here. So we are a part of the scholarship.
Yeah.
Fukuyama's work on the political science,
Absolutely.
or Esimoglu's work. I'm in touch with all of them.
Mm.
So we are developing.
Oh, wonderful.
So
And
I'm part of the global scholarship.
And on that note, Rajneesh, I just want to say, there is no way that I could have even attempted to discuss 10,000 years in 35 minutes. I think you've given me some amazing insights into your book, The Timeline India, Rediscovery of the Chronology of 10 Millennia Civilization. You gave us some very interesting pointers about Alexander and 325 BC, and why it is important to go much, much further back. You talked to us a little bit about the 4 periods, and the construct that you have used to map these 4 periods. We covered some interesting ground on Chandragupta Maurya, on the archaeological founding that support your theories. We also spoke about astronomical observations and, of course, how this will reposition India's cultural and civilizational continuity. I would love to schedule another conversation sometime, and I'll write to you separately. And this time we'll do a much deeper dive only into the first 2 periods, because this is an area that has fascinated me for a long time as well. Thank you so much for speaking to me today, and all the very best to you.
Delightful. Thank you. Thank you, Ashutosh. Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website, www.tbcy.in, to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for The Brand Called You.